Hello and welcome to the Works YouTube channel. A few weeks, maybe a month or so ago, I did a video on my first setup which featured a Pioneer A400 and a pair of Wharfedale Diamond 3s. Some of what led me to buying that amplifier was it was very positively reviewed. It was hailed as a giant killer. Now what that basically means is at that price point that amplifier would compete with amplifiers several orders of magnitude more expensive. And I've got to say it was probably quite a fair review. I was always impressed with that Pioneer A400. But a few years before the Pioneer A400 was another famous giant killer amplifier. And it was from NAD or NAD. And it's this. There's loads of reviews about this little NAD amplifier out there. But what I wanted to do today was see how this amplifier sounded on its own using yet another pair of Wharfedale Diamond 3s. But I do say I like the look of these ones. These are very retro in their appearance with their cream front. But they are a Wharfedale Diamond 3. Nothing unusual about them other than their appearance. But there is a couple of things that do annoy me with the NAD, and it's round the back that it has these god-awful spring clips to put the speaker wires in, so banana plugs are out the window. I was going to use, not to go too overboard, but I was going to use this reasonable QED wire. Well, I don't want to have to chop the banana plugs off that, so I'm going to use, again, probably a little bit higher than is necessary, but I'm going to use some silver wire that I have removed the banana plugs off because they weren't air-locked, properly terminated ones. This was just a piece of test wire, and I happen to have 2 runs of it. But the positive thing around the back was this amplifier has these little link bars there, that if you remove them, you can separate the pre and power sections of the amplifier. So in effect, if you pulled them out and had a better preamp, you could use the power section of this amp, although that's probably not ideal because as good as this amp can sound, it's not the most powerful amplifier in the world. But the other way you can do it, remove the link bars and use this as a preamplifier. So what we're going to do today is test how good this little NAD sounds as a complete integrated amplifier, and then is a lot heavier. We're going to add a Meridian 555 power amp just to see if you can improve or how much the improvement is adding a power amplifier to an integrated amplifier with preamps. Let's give it a go. Okay, so forgive the cardboard box amp stand, but basically what we've got set up here is 2 phono wires coming out of my Bluesound Node 2i using its internal DAC running into the auxiliary input of the NAD 3020. Then we've got QED silver wire running out, stripped ends into banana plugs into Wharfedale Diamond 3s, which are the lovely retro ones. And we've got sounds. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to spend a few moments listening to various tracks using this configuration. Then I'm going to add in the Meridian power amp, so pulling the terminal link posts out, running a phono wire into the back of this, using exactly the same speaker wire and everything else, and just hook it up and see what the tonal differences are when you're using this as a preamp, separating its internal power amplification side of things using a dedicated power amp, which at the time or even slightly later on would have been way more money than this. This was a very cheap amplifier when it came on the market. These are pretty cheap loudspeakers when they came out on the market. So this is a really budget orientated system, and you wouldn't necessarily have to use a Meridian power amp. There's plenty of quad power amps. There's a whole smattering of power amps. You could, even a NAD one, that you could potentially use to see if you could make your existing integrated amplifier that has pre-outs sound better. So I'll get back to you in a few minutes. I'll have a listen to this, and then we'll add in the power amplification, and then I'll do a video showing the comparisons if the camera will pick it up, and try and discuss the differences. Okay, so some time has elapsed. I've listened to this on its own. I've now switched everything over, so the Meridian power amp is giving the output, Initially, well, actually, I'll discuss the sonic characteristics in depth in this later part of this video. But initially, I thought there's not that much difference. So most of the sonic characteristics must be in the preamplification side of things, which really supports the theory that a lot of people think preamps are very, very important. Some people think they're just the input selection and the volume control. Well, categorically, that's not right. I've tried various preamps over the years and tried various preamps wired in different configurations, and they can have a massive impact on the overall tonal characteristics of the setup. A good example of this is my friend who's just changed his system to a full benchmark system, was using the benchmark DAC2 as a preamp. I can use my benchmark DAC1 as a preamp, and he's now introduced the benchmark LA4, which is a dedicated preamp. Now, in my opinion, I thought, well, that's not going to change anything because Benchmark's mission statement is as clean and as clear as humanly possible. So adding another component into the mix could only make it sound worse. Well, I couldn't have been more wrong. The reports I get back is the LA4 absolutely blows away the Benchmark DAC2 as a preamp. And it is probably because it's a dedicated preamp. Okay, so I've digressed. This is not a dedicated preamp. This is an integrated amp that has the ability to operate as a preamp or a power amp. So I'm going to have a listen to this using the Meridian 557 as the power, and then I'll do a full analysis of the tonal characteristic differences between running this as a full integrated or running it just as a preamp. I'll speak to you in a minute. Okay, so I have fairly extensively listened to the NAD 3020 on its own, running the Wharfdales, and then the NAD 3020 operating in preamplification mode, running through a Meridian 555, then up to the Wharfdale Diamond 3s. I've only used one track, and I'm going to use that same track to record these for the next part of the video, and that was Tasman Archer's Sleeping Satellite, which was a one-hit wonder, but what a fantastic song. Now, probably not the last word in audiophile quality, but it's a very good song, it's a very good piece of music, and I enjoy listening to it. But it is well recorded, and the production on it is very nice. So I picked that as my track to listen to a couple of times, just as the NAD, and then a couple of times with the Meridian. First off the bat, the Meridian 3020, I'm not surprised that got killer reviews back in the day because it is quite a pleasant sounding amplifier. It's not the last word in refinement or articulation or sense of scale. There's certainly at times a lack in power, but it's not bad. It's very listenable. I can totally see why people went crazy for it. And it doesn't sound the same as my Pioneer by any means, but it's got that similar rhythmic, kind of enjoyable listen. It makes things sound listenable. And more importantly, it makes nearly everything listenable. So even if you let me put this a different way, some systems, if you put a questionable recording on, it sounds questionable, borderline terrible. So you don't want to listen to it. As where epically well-produced pieces of music just sound epic on your system. With this very basic budget setup, if you put a questionable recording on, it's still fairly enjoyable because it isn't the most revealing. It has loads of flaws. There probably is quite a lot of distortion, but it's not unpleasant really. So it means I can sit there and appreciate a recording and enjoy the music, which is what it should be all about. So, straight NAD, well worth all of the reviews that it got back in the day. I completely support that. Enjoyable to listen to. When you switch over to running the NAD as pre into the Meridian Power, which is about 100 watts per channel, I believe, running into these, the sonic characteristics aren't tremendously different, but what you will be able to detect is better placement in the instruments, so there's a better air and space around the instruments, and we're talking subtle differences. These are not, world-beating, most revealing loudspeakers, but it's detectable. You're able to hear a little bit better placement in the music. It's clearer, it's a little bit cleaner, and it's certainly more powerful. And I don't mean in the sense of it being louder, it's just when the passages that are louder and quieter are more detectable rather than it feeling a bit flat. It's able to deal with the sort of uplift in the recording, in the production. So when everything's fully up, it's still able to deal with that. As where the NAD on its own, when you're running it at a reasonable volume level, it just got a bit smeared and a little bit congested. There's a quick note I need to make on the speakers. I did try some John Barry. I'm a real fan of John Barry. And unfortunately, like loads of little two-way speakers, these just can't handle full orchestral pieces played at realistic levels, irrespective of whether I was using just the NAD or the NAD as pre into a power. They're just not able to deal with that. They get a bit congested. But at low levels, late night stuff, they were really actually quite good. They were listenable. Back to Tasman Archer. So as the track builds up, the instrument separation using the Meridian was better. The sound staging, in terms of width, not an enormous amount of difference, but there's some detection of it being slightly deeper, and I think that's the way the amplifiers are able to extract the most dynamics in the recording, which possibly helps with the sound staging. And obviously when you turn it up louder to fairly high listening levels, just the ability to deal with impedance loads in the drive units and the dynamic range in the recording itself, it was just able to deal with that better. This has got a dedicated, quite large power supply. These speakers are not really going to worry this amplifier, as where, although these are not a torturous loudspeaker, there's a lot less power in there, a lot less current, a lot less drive to be able to excite the loudspeakers when the music gets a bit more busy. So, in a nutshell, it is possible to make this NAD sound a little bit better, but I don't know whether I'd bother, because this amplifier running on its own in the right environment for background music or semi-concentrating on the music is quite good. It was well worth those reviews. I think it's a cracking little amplifier. I had one of these many years ago, and I did keep it for a long time. I actually had that after I had my Pioneer, so I went back in time. And I've got to say a big thanks to Michael at Budget Audio Review, because he sent me this. He did a load of reviews using this amplifier and said he didn't need it anymore. And I said, that might give me a quite interesting experiment to try separating the pre and power and adding a power amp into it. So if you wanted to trick one of your friends, you can have one of these, split the pre and power and hide away a nice power amp, Quad 404 or something like that, hidden away, and then show them this, and they'll be like, I never realised that NADs really did sound that good. But it does sound okay on its own. It's a great little piece of vintage hi-fi history. Great little amplifier. So I'm going to record some sound clips. I don't know whether this is going to translate into the recordings. I will try. I'll see if it does. But just a little video I decided to do today as an experiment for myself, and thought I'd share it with you guys. Anyway, take care. I'll catch up with you soon.